Remember Josh Smith? By the end of his career, he was remembered more for this. Instead of this. In his later years, he was seen as one of the most absurd chuckers of all time, a black hole who killed the offense on whatever team he was on. Though he did have some good moments in his twilight years, the general perception was that, well, Josh Smith was a bad player. But believe it or not, at one point, Jay Smoove was a rising young star in the NBA, ready to break out and become one of the best, most versatile players in the league. In his younger days, that's what everyone thought, because his all-around game was ridiculously good, as some fans called him LeBron Light. His athleticism was off the charts, he could handle the ball pretty well, he had good court vision, a great defender who stuffed the stat sheet on a nightly basis. Unfortunately, as the years progressed, his development stagnated, and he was no longer the insane athlete he once was. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today we're going to talk about Josh Smith. How did he end up going from a super athletic rising star to, well, never making the jump and becoming one of the worst chuckers in NBA history? Smith was drafted in 2004 straight out of high school with the 17th overall pick. He would attend Oak Hill Academy, a school that's known to produce many great NBA players. He would play alongside future NBA star Rajon Rondo, and he would also play on the same AAU team as Dwight Howard. Now, coming into the 2004 draft, he was not a highly touted prospect. Yeah, his high school highlights were crazy and he routinely performed well in AAU games, and he was consistently ranked as a top 5 high school player in the nation. He also had a great performance at the 2004 Nike Hoop Summit, where he recorded 27 points, 6 rebounds, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. Scouts said that Smith was a freak of nature, a high-flying athlete with an NBA-level body that few fans have ever seen at the high school level. He drew comparisons to LeBron James, who entered the NBA in the previous year. Smith was a great transition player, an excellent rebounder too, but many also believed his skills were heavily reliant solely on athleticism, and that the fundamentals of his game were sorely lacking. On top of that, his confrontations with his coaches in high school was a point of notice. According to Matt Kamowski of Draft Express, he said, "He's had some issues in the locker room accepting coaching and maintaining positive body language on the court. He's still relatively young and inexperienced, which may have created some of the problems he had in the past. His maturation as both a person and a player in the future will be an important step in the development of the Atlanta franchise." While he was a double-double machine in high school, a ridiculous rebounder and defender, the problem was he didn't do it because he was good at boxing out or positioning himself. His success was mainly because, well, he was strictly more athletic than his competition. Smith would also spend most of his time playing in the paint, but in the NBA, he would be quite undersized for a big man, coming in at just 6'9", 210 pounds. As a result, he would be forced to play out of position and play more on the perimeter, which he was not used to doing. That was the first issue that many fans believed would hold him back, and it was also a reason why he slid down the draft boards and was eventually taken with the 17th overall pick. For his first few years in the NBA, he looked really good because he was able to get by with his physical tools. He even won the 2005 Slam Dunk Contest as a rookie, putting on an amazing show. Smith was also a very good offensive rebounder and a very good shot blocker as well. While Hawks fans were high on him and recognized his potential, the early signs of his flaws started to show already. He took 36% of his total field goals from mid-range distance. 36%, that's more than 1/3 of all his shots. And yet, he only hit 28% of them. I'm using a rather liberal definition of mid-range, as I'm saying it's between around 3 feet to the three-point line, which is a wide range. But you can tell from those numbers that he was clearly a terrible shooter. In fact, he was by far the worst mid-range shooter in the entire league, even as a rookie. Now, you might say, well, yeah, I mean, he's 19 years old and shooting was a big issue with him, but if you give the young guy the confidence to shoot more, he would get better over time. So this is what the problem was. Because even though his shooting did improve a little bit over time, it was still nowhere near good enough to be efficient. It's easy to say that someone's jump shot will get better eventually, but for most players, that doesn't actually happen. And for Josh Smith, that really didn't happen. For the next few years, despite his horrific shooting, he would blossom into a great all-around player, displaying the handles and passing skills he showed back in high school. In the 2006-07 season, at just 21 years old, Smith averaged over 16 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.4 steals, and nearly 3 blocks a game. He became the youngest player in NBA history to record 500 total blocks, and also the youngest to block 10 shots in a single game. However, even though his stats looked good on paper, he was struggling a lot. His turnover rate was insane, as he averaged almost the same number of turnovers as assists. Additionally, his shooting was still piss poor. What's even worse was that he was taking even more mid-range shots compared to his rookie season, and he was still shooting a terrible 30% on those shots. In his first 3 seasons, his overall true shooting percentage was only 50.4%. For a guy as athletic and strong as Smith, that's a terrible percentage. It was about 3% lower than the league average efficiency. So, something was wrong. There's no way that this guy, with all the physical tools in the world, should be scoring this poorly. He shouldn't be shooting this many jumpers when he's basically unstoppable attacking the rim. The thing is, we still don't know why he played like this. Some Hawks fans back in the day blamed it on coach Mike Woodson. From my experience of watching Mike Woodson coach the Knicks, he had a very simple game plan, and kinda just conceded to whatever his stars wanted to do. He was kind of a pushover, to be honest. On the Hawks, I feel like the same thing happened with Smith. Maybe he just never told Smith to, stop shooting, and try to attack the rim more. In Smith's first 5 seasons, until 2009, only 43% of his shots came at the rim. Even when he transitioned from small forward to power forward, he was still jacking up jumpers like crazy and breaking like all of them. At the same time, remember how scouts said that Smith had a hard time being coached in high school? Well, maybe the same thing was going on here. Perhaps Smith just didn't want to listen to Mike Woodson. In their time together, they never got along. According to this article from 2009, the feud between Woodson and Smith was complicated. Smith said, "This isn't about 2 people hating each other, it's not a personal thing like that. We just agreed to disagree on some things." The writer added on that, "The culture of open communication and trust between players and coach is palpable, and that the problems we have with Woodson are innate to the way he thinks about basketball. We have problems with some players' shot selection. Woodson thinks defense is the best offense. We have reached the point where our coach's fundamental entrenchment in what he believes has separated from what the team needs." Basically, Smith's reluctance to change his game was due to both him and Mike Woodson having different opinions. But surprise! Smith finally did change his game. In the 2009-10 season, he barely shot any threes and took over 55% of his shots at the rim, and also hit those shots at a 66% clip. He averaged the highest scoring efficiency of his career at 54%, primarily from more drives to the rim and fewer mid-range and three-pointers. His improved defensive play also earned him second-team All-Defense, so things were looking bright. It looked like his career was finally getting on the right track with him and Woodson working out their differences. The Hawks also won 53 games, the most they won in the Joe Johnson and Josh Smith era. After a disappointing second-round series where the Hawks got swept really badly by Orlando, Coach Woodson was not re-signed. Then in the following season, Smith inexplicably reverted back to his old habits. In the 2010-11 season, his attempts at the rim dropped from 55% to only 31%. Up until then, that was the lowest mark of his career, and he went back to jacking up over 2 threes a game on 25 to 30%. It would remain around that number for the rest of his career. That's insane when you think about it. A guy like Josh Smith, who's so good at finishing at the basket and playing bully ball, resorting to jump shots 70% of the time? Under new coach Larry Drew, Smith's playstyle did not change for the better and his bad habits continued to get worse. While his counting stats were still excellent and reflected those of a star player, he was far from it. From 2011 to 2013, he would average about 18 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, over a steal and a block, yet as impressive as his stats were, he was a detriment to his team. Fast forward a bit, and by the 2013 offseason, Smith would sign with Detroit on a 4-year, $54 million deal. Right when the signing happened, everyone realized that it would be a terrible fit. Not only would Smith be back to playing small forward, which he shouldn't be playing to begin with, but he's also playing alongside Greg Monroe and Andre Drummond, 2 players who might have been even worse shooters than him. They couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. About 1 year later, the Pistons finally figured out that Smith was terrible and they waived him, even with 3 years left on his contract. Over the next 4 years, he would bounce around multiple teams and multiple leagues. Despite a relatively good stint in Houston where Smith played well in the playoffs, he didn't get any major offers after that. At this point, his NBA career was over, and by the age of 31, he was out of the NBA. It was a career that was filled with excitement and joy early on, but the fundamental issues with his playstyle and lack of good coaching really hurt his development. Could he have become a multiple-time All-Star if he just tweaked his game a little bit? Of course. He never lacked the skills or the talent, it was his mentality that held him back. If you look at his prime years in the league and his early years, there was really no significant improvement in any area of his game. The lack of dedication to the game and the lack of motivation to continue improving beyond what he could already do. That sums up the career of Josh Smith. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.